In the lively town of Enugu, twin sisters Adaeze and Ifeyinwa appeared identical, but their hearts were worlds apart. Adaeze, a humble nurse, was known for her kindness and hard work, while Ifeyinwa chased fame and luxury, believing they were her birthright. When Adaeze's quiet love story with Dr. Emeka, a veterinarian from Europe, began to blossom, Ifeyinwa's jealousy took root. Mocking her sister for choosing love over wealth, Ifeyinwa saw an opportunity for herself when a life-changing envelope arrived. If you are new to this channel, kindly like, share and subscribe and tell us where you are watching it from. Your support helps us tell more stories. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Adaeze stood in front of her house, gazing at the distant hills. Her hands were busy washing the last of the clothes for the day, but her mind was occupied by the same thought that had consumed her for weeks: her future. The long-awaited package from Dr. Emeka had been promised for days. Dr. Emeka, the kind-hearted veterinarian from Europe, who had stolen her heart with his gentle words and shared dreams of a life together. They had been speaking for months, each night growing closer through video calls, sharing their hopes and making plans for the future. And now, that future seemed almost within her grasp. A loud honk from the street interrupted her thoughts, followed by the rumble of a DHL van. Adaeze's heart skipped a beat. She wiped her hands quickly on her apron and ran to the gate. The delivery man, a tall figure with a tired face, handed her a thick envelope. She stared at it for a moment, feeling the weight of anticipation in her chest. It was from Dr. Emeka, her ticket to a new life, to a future she had always dreamed of. "Thank you," she said, barely able to suppress her excitement as she signed for the package. As the van drove away, she turned to the envelope in her hands, her heart racing with anticipation. She hurried inside, sitting down at the small wooden table in the kitchen. She carefully peeled open the envelope, her hands trembling slightly as she removed its contents. First the visa, then a flight ticket, and finally the letter. A note from Dr. Emeka confirming that everything had been arranged. The date was set for her to travel. The future she had worked so hard for, the future that seemed like a distant dream, was now real. Tears filled Adaeze's eyes as she read the letter. Her heart swelled with emotion as she realized that all the waiting, all the struggles, had led to this moment. She was finally going to meet Dr. Emeka in person. She would be leaving the life she had known and stepping into a new world, together with the man she loved. But her joy was interrupted by a sharp voice from the doorway. "Well, well, well. Look what we have here," Ifeyinwa said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Ifeyinwa had been standing silently by the door, watching her twin with a mixture of disdain and jealousy. Adaeze looked up and smiled, unaware of the dark thoughts simmering in her sister's heart. "This is it, Ifeyinwa. I'm going to meet him. We're going to be married, and I'm finally going to the UK, Adaeze said, her voice filled with excitement. She couldn't contain the happiness that bubbled inside her. But Ifeyinwa's expression didn't change. She stepped forward, taking the envelope from Adaeze's hands with an exaggerated sigh. "The UK, huh? And here I am, stuck in this small town, while you get to live a fairy tale." Adaeze blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Ifeyinwa," she continued with a sneer. "Why should you get to live that life? You, who don't even know how to dress properly, who spends your days working at the hospital and living in that small room. You get to go to Europe, while I stay here wasting away in this town." Her voice rose, bitterness leaking into her words. Adaeze frowned, trying to hold on to the joy that had filled her moments before. "Ifeyinwa, what are you talking about? Dr. Emeka and I are in love. This is real." Ife raised an eyebrow. "Love? Please, I see what you're doing. You've got your dreams, your fantasies, but it's not the life you deserve. I deserve it. I should be the one traveling, wearing designer clothes, living the high life. Not you." Her words stung, and for a moment, Adaeze felt a cold shiver run down her spine. But she pushed it aside, remembering the plans she had made with Dr. Emeka, the future she had built in her mind, the life that was now waiting for her. But Ifeyinwa wasn't finished. She continued watching Adaeze with cold, calculating eyes, her mind already formulating a plan. You know, Ifeyinwa said, her smile tight. Maybe it's time for me to have that life. I've always known I was meant for more than this. Maybe I'll take what you're going to get. Adaeze didn't fully understand the meaning behind her sister's words, but she felt the shift. The joy she had felt moments ago began to wane as Ifeyinwa's presence turned from playful to something darker. Adaeze, still holding the letter from Dr. Emeka, smiled nervously, trying to brush off her sister's bitterness. I just want to go, Ifeyinwa. This is my chance. My future. But Ifeyinwa's eyes narrowed, and a dark thought began to seed in her mind. The plan was already taking shape. Your future, she muttered, is about to change. That night, Ifeyinwa set her plan into motion. Her jealousy had taken root, and her mind raced with the idea that she could seize the life her sister had worked so hard for. She invited Adaeze to dinner, telling her it would be a celebration of the new journey she was about to embark on. She prepared Adaeze's favorite dish, spicy jollof rice, and chilled some zobo, the drink they both adored, with plenty of ice. What Adaeze didn't know was that Ifeyinwa had slipped powerful sedatives into the drink. It was a small, calculated move, one that she knew would render Adaeze unconscious long enough to execute her plan without interference. Adaeze, exhausted from the excitement of her new life, drank the zobo without hesitation, unaware of the danger lurking within. As the evening wore on, Ifeyinwa watched as her sister's eyes grew heavy. Within minutes, Adaeze was slumped over on the sofa, fast asleep, her breathing steady and deep. Ifeyinwa felt a cold sense of satisfaction wash over her as she stood over her sister's slumbering form. This was the moment she had been waiting for. With swift, practiced movements, Ifeyinwa dragged Adaeze's limp body into the back storeroom. The room, filled with old boxes and forgotten belongings, would become the place where her deception began. She locked the door with a heavy padlock, ensuring Adaeze would be unable to stop her once she carried out her plan. Ife took a deep breath and turned her attention to Adaeze's belongings. She took off her sister's simple dress and replaced it with an identical one that would help her blend in. Then she tied her own hair back into a modest bun, mimicking Adaeze's hairstyle as closely as possible. But it wasn't enough to simply look like Adaeze. She needed to be Adaeze. Ifeyinwa practiced her sister's soft mannerisms, her gentle posture, and even her calm, patient way of speaking, watching herself in the mirror as she rehearsed each movement. She looked at herself in the mirror with a satisfied smile. This will work, she thought. I will live the life I deserve. The next morning, Ifeyinwa made her move. She approached their parents, acting as though everything was perfectly normal. Adaeze has gone to visit an aunt in the next village, she said, her voice smooth and convincing. She wanted to get away for a bit before her big move. Their parents, oblivious to the deception, smiled with pride and gave their blessing. They had no reason to doubt Ifeyinwa's words. They had no reason to question the sudden change in Adaeze's demeanor. With the lie successfully planted, Ifeyinwa felt the thrill of victory coursing through her veins. She made her way to the airport, her heart pounding in her chest. Holding Adaeze's passport in her hands, she stepped up to the immigration counter. Please let this work, she thought, her palms sweating. She was terrified that one slip-up, one misplaced glance, would ruin everything. She looked down at the passport, trying to steady her nerves as she presented it to the officer. The officer glanced at her, then at the passport. Ifeyinwa's breath hitched in her chest as the seconds dragged on. She forced herself to look down, hoping the officer wouldn't notice the difference, wouldn't realize that this wasn't Adaeze. To her surprise, the officer simply waved her through, mumbling something about safe travels. Ifeyinwa felt a sense of relief flood through her, though it was brief. She quickly turned away, still unsure whether her luck would hold out. This was it, she thought. I'm on my way to the life I've always wanted. As she walked toward the boarding gate, Ifeyinwa couldn't shake the feeling of being an imposter, but it was quickly replaced by the exhilaration of what lay ahead. The life she had always dreamed of was finally within her grasp, and nothing, not even her conscience, could stop her now. She boarded the plane, a smile creeping across her face. The journey to her new life had begun. As the plane soared into the sky, Ifeyinwa's heart raced with excitement. She leaned back in her seat, imagining the life that awaited her, a life of luxury and opulence in a European city. Perhaps London or Paris, she thought, where she would walk down cobbled streets lined with designer shops, sipping cappuccinos in trendy cafes, and attending glamorous parties. It was the life she had dreamed of, the life she felt was owed to her. She envisioned Dr. Emeka, the man she believed would be her ticket to that world, waiting for her with flowers and a grand car, ready to whisk her away into the realm of high society. The reality of the situation was far from what she had imagined. When the plane finally touched down, Ifeyinwa's excitement began to fade. She stared out of the small airplane window, her mind racing. This wasn't London. This wasn't Paris. No, the plane had landed in Finland, far from the bustling streets of the city she had pictured in her mind. Her heart sank as she saw the snow-covered ground and the endless expanse of trees stretching as far as the eye could see. The cold wind hit her as soon as she stepped off the plane, and she shivered involuntarily. This was not the warm, luxurious European life she had envisioned. Waiting for her on the tarmac was Dr. Emeka, but he was nothing like the suave, well-dressed man she had pictured. Instead of a tailored suit and a slick car, he wore a thick winter coat, his face covered with a scruffy beard and a pair of rugged boots that seemed well worn from years of use. He didn't greet her with a grand gesture or flowers. Instead, he simply gave her a small, quiet smile and motioned for her to follow him. Ife's disappointment grew as she followed him to an old, reliable pickup truck. Where's the limo? She thought, her mind racing. Where's the wealth, the glamour? They drove through endless forests, the trees towering over them in a vast, almost suffocating silence. There were no grand buildings, no fancy shops, no bustling crowds. Instead, the land was quiet and isolated. The road seemed to stretch on forever, with nothing but snow and trees surrounding them. This was not the life Ifeyinwa had imagined. When they finally arrived at Dr. Emeka's home, Ifeyinwa could hardly believe her eyes. The house was small, a humble log cabin surrounded by snow, with no signs of luxury in sight. There were no sprawling gardens, no fountains, no manicured lawns, just a simple, modest cabin in the middle of nowhere. Dr. Emeka's farm was not the picture of wealth she had envisioned. Instead, there were reindeer and huskies running around, the animals a stark contrast to the designer clothes and lavish lifestyle Ifeyinwa had dreamed about. Ife's stomach twisted with disappointment. This isn't what I signed up for, she thought bitterly. This isn't what I deserve. Despite her growing disillusionment, Ifeyinwa tried to maintain her composure. She smiled weakly, telling herself that things would get better. Maybe this is just a temporary setback, she reasoned. Once I settle in, things will get better. I can make it work. But the days that followed only deepened her sense of frustration. The farm life was far from glamorous. Instead of attending high-profile events or shopping in Paris, Ifeyinwa found herself shoveling snow, feeding reindeer, and working with the animals. It was exhausting and far more physically demanding than she was used to. The luxurious life she had imagined was slipping further and further from her grasp. The simple, humble existence of Dr. Emeka's farm seemed to mock everything she had hoped for. She tried to convince herself that it was just a phase. Maybe he's just starting out, she thought. Maybe we'll move to the city soon. Maybe things will change. But deep down, Ifeyinwa knew the truth. This wasn't the life she had dreamed of. This wasn't the soft, luxurious existence she had longed for. It was hard work, isolation, and simplicity, a stark contrast to everything she had hoped for. Each day, the reality of her situation weighed heavier on her, and the life she had imagined began to crumble. The dreams of wealth, luxury, and fame slowly faded, leaving her with nothing but the cold, hard truth. The life she had taken from her sister wasn't the fairy tale she had hoped for. It was a harsh, unforgiving reality that she was now trapped in. The tension that had been building between Ifeyinwa and Dr. Emeka finally reached its breaking point one cold evening. Dr. Emeka, ever the humble soul, asked Ifeyinwa to prepare a traditional Nigerian dish for dinner. It was a simple request, one that seemed to be rooted in the intimacy of their budding relationship. However, for Ifeyinwa, it was a request that she knew would expose her deception. She had no clue how to cook, especially not the rich, flavorful dishes her sister Adaeze had perfected over the years. But she was determined to make it work. How hard could it be? She thought, her mind racing. She watched a few cooking tutorials online, trying to learn how to make a classic Nigerian soup. She gathered the ingredients: stockfish, crayfish, spinach, and palm oil. Yet no matter how much she tried, something felt off. The soup was too watery, the stockfish too hard, the seasoning far too weak. But she pressed on, thinking that perhaps if she added enough palm oil, the taste would improve. When dinner was finally served, Ifeyinwa presented the soup to Dr. Emeka with a forced smile, hoping he wouldn't notice. But the moment Dr. Emeka tasted it, his expression faltered. He put his spoon down, studying the dish with a look of mild disappointment. "I thought you were a nurse," he said, his voice colder than she had ever heard it. "You've cooked for entire hospital wards before. Why is this so wrong?" The words struck Ifeyinwa harder than she expected. Her chest tightened as guilt washed over her, but she quickly masked it with a smile. She had lied so much, she was beginning to believe her own story. "It's just food," she tried to tell herself. "He won't notice anything else. He's just picky." But Dr. Emeka wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. There was no more warmth in his voice, only a piercing calmness that made Ifeyinwa's stomach twist with anxiety. "I'm not sure what's going on here," he said slowly. "But I've been patient with you. It's time we talk." Ife's heart raced as she braced herself. She had hoped this moment would never come, but it was inevitable. Dr. Emeka stood up and moved to the other side of the table, where Ifeyinwa sat frozen in place. He looked down at her, his eyes full of a mixture of disappointment and quiet anger. "You're not Adaeze, are you?" he asked, his voice calm but unwavering. The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Ifeyinwa felt her world begin to unravel. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She wanted to deny it, but the guilt was too heavy to bear. The charade was over. She had been caught. "I knew something was off," Dr. Emeka continued, his gaze intense. "The way you dress, the way you talk, even the way you carry yourself, it's all wrong. Adaeze is kind, patient, and real. She would never have made this kind of mess in the kitchen. I didn't want to believe it, but now it's clear. You're not her." The room seemed to close in on Ifeyinwa, the weight of her deception pressing down on her chest. She felt the tears welling up, but she quickly blinked them away, unwilling to show weakness. Her entire plan was crumbling before her eyes, and she could feel the humiliation creeping in. Dr. Emeka didn't look angry. He looked sad, almost resigned. "I've been waiting for the woman I thought was Adaeze. The woman who shared my values, my heart. But now I see the truth. I don't want someone who's after my wealth. I don't want someone pretending to be someone they're not. I want someone who will love me for who I am, not for what I have." Ife's mind raced. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She had played a dangerous game, and now she was facing the consequences. She had thought she could deceive Dr. Emeka into believing she was Adaeze. She had thought she could have the life she dreamed of. But she hadn't counted on the man's integrity, his honesty, and his ability to see through the illusion. Dr. Emeka's next words hit Ifeyinwa like a blow. "I'm not just a veterinarian," he said quietly, almost as an afterthought. "I'm part of the Adeyemi family. You've heard of us, haven't you? We control shipping lines and properties in Lagos. But I left all that behind. I don't want that life. I want someone who values me for me, not for what I can give them." The revelation sent shockwaves through Ifeyinwa. She had no idea who he truly was. Dr. Emeka, the quiet, humble man she had deceived, was not just a veterinarian. He was a billionaire, a part of one of the most powerful families in Nigeria. Her face flushed with shame as Dr. Emeka's words sank in. She had taken everything for granted, the love, the opportunity, the chance to build a life with someone who truly cared. And now, all of it was slipping through her fingers, as if it had never been hers to begin with. Dr. Emeka did not call the police, though his disappointment ran deep. Instead, he sent Ifeyinwa back to Nigeria, a journey that would take her farther from the life she had dreamed of, and closer to the reality of her actions. The flight back was a blur, long, lonely, and filled with the weight of her humiliation. Every mile felt like a punishment as she sat in her seat, her mind racing, replaying the disaster she had created. When Ifeyinwa finally landed in Lagos, it was as if the world had shifted around her. She was no longer the confident, stylish woman who had boarded the flight to Europe. Her clothes were mismatched, her hair a mess, and her makeup smeared from the long journey. She had arrived in Nigeria, but it was as though she had never left. The extravagant dreams she once held so tightly had been shattered. As she made her way through the airport, she couldn't help but feel the eyes of the people on her, eyes that once admired her for the life they believed she was living. Now, those same eyes looked at her with pity, mockery, and confusion. She had failed. She had failed herself, and she had failed the life she thought was meant for her. When she arrived at her parents' house, the reality of her situation hit her even harder. Inside, she found Adaeze sitting with Dr. Emeka's lawyer, a man in a sharp suit, who was pressing charges for her actions. The tension in the room was thick as Ifeyinwa stood in the doorway, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. Her parents looked at her, their expressions filled with concern and disappointment. They had once believed in her lies, but now it was clear she was facing the consequences of her choices. Adaeze, ever the picture of grace, did not look at Ifeyinwa with anger or resentment. Instead, she offered her sister a chance, an opportunity to make amends. "Ifeyinwa," she said softly, "you can make this right. But the cost is high." The words were difficult for Ifeyinwa to hear, but they were true. Adaeze had always been the more generous one, the one who believed in second chances, even when they were not deserved. The price, however, was steep. Ifeyinwa would have to work off the cost of her flight and visa by laboring in the hospital laundry, performing the most menial of tasks, folding sheets, scrubbing floors, and washing uniforms. It was a punishment that matched the depth of her actions, and though Ifeyinwa hated it, she knew it was the only way to make amends. Months passed, each day blending into the next as Ifeyinwa worked tirelessly in the laundry room. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but in some way it was exactly what she needed. The hard work humbled her, reminding her of the difference between the life she had once dreamed of and the life she now had to face. Every shift, every moment spent folding laundry, felt like a small step toward redemption, though she knew she could never fully erase the damage she had caused. Then, one day, Dr. Emeka returned to Nigeria. Ifeyinwa didn't know why she expected any kind of acknowledgement from him, but she hoped, deep down, that he would at least glance her way. Instead, he passed her in the laundry room without so much as a word. He didn't look at her. He didn't even acknowledge her presence. To him, she was a ghost, someone who had no place in his life anymore. It was a cold, cruel reminder of how far she had fallen. Meanwhile, Adaeze and Dr. Emeka's lives moved forward. They were married in a beautiful ceremony, the kind Ifeyinwa had once imagined for herself. She wasn't part of the bridal party. Instead, she worked at the back, serving food to the guests, her hands trembling as she moved from table to table. When the guests asked her about her time abroad, Ifeyinwa would only shake her head, her eyes downcast, and mutter, "Nigeria is sweet. There is no snow in Ibadan." The words felt hollow, a bitter reminder of the life she had once wanted and the reality she now had to live with. The life she had dreamed of luxury, fame, and ease, was now nothing but a distant fantasy. She was left with the painful lessons of her actions. That deceit, no matter how clever, always has a price. And that in the end, no amount of wealth or status could make up for the damage done to the heart and soul. Kindly like and subscribe for more stories.